It was definitely a complete renegade move, but it was just an opportunity that presented itself. And I'm definitely not someone who looks that kind of opportunity. I don't take it lightly. I think that, it happens for a reason, and why not just go for it?
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Shauna Harrison is on the show today. She is a good friend of mine. She has her PhD in public health. She's a self-proclaimed nerd, hip-hop head, jock, yogi. She's just a movement expert. After she got her PhD and she finished all of these years of going to school, she decided to not pursue the normal route. She did something totally renegade and ended up getting a partnership, a sponsorship with Under Armour. I connected with her in 2011, 2012-ish. And for those of you who see all of these Instagram health and wellness, fitness influencers all over the Instagram feed, she was one of the original. Shauna was one of the very, very first. And she's been bringing creativity every single day to a lot of people's lives, and also helping them stay healthy, get healthy, have fun. I mean, hip-hop yogi who has her PhD, that's just not always the typical thing you hear. She's a true class act, has a heart of gold, and I'm excited for you to hear her story professionally and personally. We get pretty deep here because she doesn't hold back. Oh, and one more thing. For those of you who might be feeling like you're not quite sure if you even want to be on social media anymore, if it's bringing any good, and if you really struggle with it and get frustrated, this is probably a really good conversation for you to listen to because we talk all of that through. Shauna has kind of a philosophy that I think you'll find very healthy and helpful. All right, everyone, I've got an announcement. As of today, we are officially enrolling for the 2021 Renegade Accelerator Program, formerly called the Renegade Brand Bootcamp. Okay, so who is this program for? What is it? The Renegade Accelerator is for driven female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs ready to massively increase their impact and income. The program is for like-minded, like-hearted women all over the globe. The experience is intimate, live, real-time, virtual, and it's led by me. Our curriculum is equal parts education, practical education, collaboration, and accountability. In the accelerator, you'll learn directly from me, and I share everything I've learned over the past 20 years in business. We meet in real time to learn, discuss, and grow together. This is high touch. I'll teach you a variety of things, from personal branding to the business side of public speaking, podcasting, publishing, marketing partnerships, how to productize your intellectual property, and we even talk about investing. I teach you all about the different types of investing in order to build your personal wealth. You will also learn the Renegade mentality, which is a key ingredient in your success to generate real results. This program is the career love of my life because I get to curate a mosaic of driven, like-minded, like-hearted women who come together to lift each other and themselves up to the next level. After the Renegade Accelerator, you become a member of my top-level alumni community. This group of unmatched women who are making a positive impact is personally curated by me. The relationship building and networking opportunities are endless, and this collective of real, valuable connections will be something that you have forever. If you're at the point where you are ready to take action and accelerate, head to renegadeaccelerator.com. You can sign up for more information where I will guide you in determining if the program and the timing is right for you. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Why not now? Head to renegadeaccelerator.com. Shauna, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on and talk through your journey. Before we get there, can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We'll dissect it that day, that minute, that hour, and talk it through.
Yeah. I feel like every part of my life has been a why not now. I feel like I live in a constant state of why not now. But I think my biggest moment thus far, you were actually involved in, and that was sort of post PhD. I had been in grad school at that point for almost 8 years or 8.5 years. I actually don't remember, but it was 2 masters and a PhD back to back, moving across the country, no break in between. I'd been in academia for a really long time. I was super burned out, and I wasn't sure if I was just burned out from being tired from and not having a break, or if it was academia that I didn't want to be involved in. And, after getting a PhD, the sort of normal path is to get a postdoc and start to go down the professor track and all of that. And it was not sitting with me. And I just needed to back down and take a break. And I'd been teaching fitness at that point for a really long time. I taught it on the side all through college, master's, PhD, everything. And so I was like, I'm going to move home, take a break, give myself 6 months and sort of just see what happens. And was teaching at home back here in California. And somehow in that time started talks with Under Armour because my PhD was done in Baltimore and that's where Under Armour was based. Long story short, got sponsored by Under Armour. And that was kind of this moment of okay, I just got a sponsorship by a major brand, am I really going to try to go back to academia? I applied for one postdoc and I didn't get it. And it wasn't exactly what I wanted anyway. And I was just I could keep pushing and try to do this academia thing right now, or I could just see what happens with what path is going to, come in front of me with this fitness side, which is not something I ever thought I would do full time. And then right after I got signed is kind of when I started reading a lot more of your articles and, came across your book. It was actually your book title first. And then I somehow managed to get your attention on Twitter and got picked to read the book before it came out and write a little something about it. And, everything that was kind of talked about in that book with social media, kind of really helped me launch into this whole different world of, and it was the early end of social media with fitness and yoga and all of that. And it just took me in a completely different direction, a direction that didn't even exist, because obviously social media when I first started grad school wasn't even really a thing, let alone fitness and influencers and the whole everything that kind of comes with that. So I don't remember necessarily being specifically, why not right this second? It was just, well, this came along and why not just go for it? Let's just see what happens. And I feel like that's a very common thread across a lot of things that I continue to do now. But I think that was a really pivotal moment. And I also said to myself, it's not like I can't come back to academia. Having a PhD to fall back on is not a bad thing. So I felt like it wasn't really too much of a risk. It was definitely Renegade, everyone I went to school with was postdoc and or already in a faculty position or working for the government or, doing all of those things. And here I am. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing photo shoots and
hip hop yoga and
right. Yeah, exactly. And so it was definitely a complete renegade move, but it was just like an opportunity that presented itself. And I'm definitely not someone who looks that kind of opportunity. Like I don't take it lightly. I think that, it happens for a reason and it's an incredible opportunity and why not just go for it?
Well, let's dive in. There's so many areas I want to explore with this because you went to school for a long time, Shauna. I mean, that investment is huge in terms of time. And I'm sure there are a lot of listeners that have put a lot of time and energy, years into something. And then they just feel like, you know what, this just isn't still the route I want to go. Did you know that you'd be able to still kind of pull from your education and you'd be able to kind of leverage it and use it? Or did you feel like this was a complete 180 and you were, in a sense, kind of starting fresh? It's interesting. At this point now, you probably realize, sure, you used a lot of different components from your academia world and just how to learn. But at the moment, did it feel like you were jumping ship from two masters and a PhD?
I mean, I knew because fitness and yoga are in the realm of health and my PhD and one of my masters are in public health. So it wasn't a complete jump ship, but it was very obviously a jump ship of the norm of where you go with those types of backgrounds. And so I think for me, it wasn't so much my end of feeling like that. And I'm sure other people feel this way too. It was more like, I didn't want people who had been there and helped me get those degrees to feel disappointed that I didn't go into academia, Mm-hmm. I like my advisor who, and I had no reason to think that she wasn't going to be supportive because she was 100% supportive of the entire process that I had. But the department and, I was on, especially for my PhD, I was on different grants and things like that, so I was being funded by people who were investing in me to go and do the things that they wanted me to go and do. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go just be sponsored by Under Armour and teach fitness. And, and so like, I had this feeling in the beginning, at least, of, am I letting people down? Even though I'm not really one of those people that, yes, I'm a people pleaser, but at the same time, I kind of do my own thing. So it was just like, how do I explain this to people? It was more of kind of what was going on in my head. How do I don't want to say justify, but that's the word that keeps coming to my head.
I think that's a very common and relatable thing that people are going through. How do I explain this? How do I justify it? How do I even say it?
Yeah. And, the irony is that since then, I've been asked to speak a few times at Hopkins to the students by the department about alternative careers for public health, because it was something that they realized, or they are realizing that, they're not really prepping the doctoral students for alternative careers, right? Like they do a ton of prep on like, this is what happens when you go through academia, the quote unquote normal way. But like, there's a lot of other things that you can do, especially in the realm of health, that might not be so applicable for other degrees. But in the realm of public health, like it's a huge field. I still use to this day, like a lot of the stuff that I learned, because what I studied was actually health communication and how to present information to the public in a way that makes sense for them, that's digestible for them, that's relevant for them, and all of that. And that's literally what social media is. So I almost feel like it prepped me to be able to like do a good job of explaining things and presenting myself in a way that I really wanted to present myself. But yeah, I mean, in the moment that it's not even just one moment, and I'm sure other people can relate to this. It's like, it's just those first months or even years of like trying to do something that's, off the beaten path. Like, of course you're going to think about like, well, what are people thinking? And like, is this the right thing to do? And, all of those questions go through your head. And At the same time, though, there was something very, very tangible for me that's like, no, I feel like I'm making a bigger impact right now doing what I do. And this feels more applicable than what I could have done in academia at the same time in my life. And that, to me, was kind of what kept me going, because I was like, sure, I could be doing research right now that may or may not get published. And then if it gets published, it may or may not get used. And if it gets used, it may or may not have an impact. And if it has an impact, it could be on one person, it could be on 100 people, it could be on 1,000 people. I don't know. Or I could be doing what I'm doing right here on social media and have direct, contact with, even if it's only 100 people, like having contact with 100 people on a daily basis is a little bit more definitive than all these what ifs,
Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm so glad you talked it through, and even knowing now, which we'll get to your present day, but not quite yet, but just as a sneak peek for people, as you have these various opportunities popping up to become a professor and do it in different ways, it's back full circle that was never lost. That opportunity and that possibility was never closed off. And I think when we do something that's different from what we planned or what we had built up toward, in your case, a lot of time and resources in your education, when we change lanes, we're still transferring our skills and bringing them with us and our experience, and we're not starting from scratch. So it's just nice to kind of remind ourselves of that, because I think sometimes we think we're climbing a ladder and now we're changing our ladder against a different wall and we're starting at the bottom rung again, but it's actually not quite the case, because you have applied so much, and the cred that comes with having a PhD. I mean, that's amazing. So one of the things too that comes to mind is I'll never forget, we've probably known each other for about 6 years now, and I get a photo from you. It's probably Twitter, maybe Instagram. I think you were studying and maybe reading the book and taking my online classes, and you had your highlighter out. You might have been in a yoga pose, possibly. And that's one of the things. You're so resourceful and you will learn anything. You're just like a professional learner. You'll just go find it and do it. But I love how you just took it into your own hands, because the space for, let's just say, Instagram, yoga, health, and wellness in 2011, 2012 was wildly different than it is now. And you were probably the first true influencer I knew in that space. But let's talk about that journey, because it was so new. You were doing things then that you can't even really do anymore, because it's just become so flooded, and it feels like the sea of sameness a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It was a whole different world back then. And, I tend to be a little bit more of an early adopter when it comes to most things, like I was an early adopter of Facebook and, all of that. Instagram, I wouldn't say I was a late adopter by any stretch of the imagination, but like I was late for myself, late for my norm. I wasn't quite sure, and this was the early days of Instagram, right? Where everyone was like, what's the difference between this and Facebook? I don't get it. Like you have some filters and like, that's pretty much it. But back then there wasn't really that much, but I ended up getting on Instagram sort of a little bit later in the game of the early adopters. I would say I was a late early adopter, but I was definitely an early adopter in the fitness and yoga space and sort of using it for that. And I had been doing, prior to like actually getting sponsored by Under Armour, they had been doing this online competition where they had you do all these different challenges, like see how many jumps you can do in a minute in a jump rope, or, like just random things like that. And it was like this community that formed. And so there was all these people. And that's when I started filming myself, because honestly, back in, 2006, when I left Los Angeles to go to Baltimore, people had asked me that were taking my class if I could film myself so that they could watch the classes since I was moving. And I was like, no, there's no way. I'm like, I'm not one of those fitness people. I'm not one of those yoga people. Like, I'm not a model. I don't want to record myself. And I just laugh now because like all I do is record myself. But, at the time I was like, there's just no way I'm not going to do that. And this challenge that Under Armour did got me to like actually start learning how to record myself and to make videos and to do all that stuff. And then through that, that's right when I got on Instagram. And Instagram at the time, like there was some yoga people on there for sure. There were some fitness people on there for sure. Like there was a challenge that someone did called Yoga a Day, and it was like one yoga pose a day. I want to say it was probably the first yoga challenge that was created, at least that I can remember. And I joined that challenge just because I was like, oh, that seems fun. And like I could do it in random places, and why not, Again, enough, why not now? And so I did it, and I was like, oh, this is, kind of fun. And like back then, because there wasn't very many people, the community was super supportive. Like everybody kind of knew each other. Like you got to know, like all the people who have millions of followers now were people that I was interacting with almost regularly back then. And it just became this thing. And I was like, someone needs to do this for fitness. And I was like, but it shouldn't just be fitness. It should be fitness and yoga, because like that's, I've always kind of bridged the gap of the two. And so I approached Under Armour and I was like, hey, I kind of want to do this challenge similar to this, but I want it to be like fitness and yoga. And let's call it Sweat a Day, because they had this like sweat every day campaign going on. So I was like, it kind of fits with your campaign, but it's like not the exact same thing, whatever. They were like, sure, let's do it. So I did it for a month, and a lot of the girls that were on the online challenge kind of joined in. And the first month it was like, it was so haphazard. It was just like, one day was push up, one day was squat, one day was pull. I mean, it was just like super basic. And there wasn't much to it. But then like the second month, because I got some people like involved in it, and they would, use the hashtag and like whatever. And Under Armour was like, well, what if we had some prizes? We'll give you some prizes to give away. I was like, cool, great. And so then we started adding prizes. It started to grow. And then they needed to take time off to do the second version of their online competition. So we took a few months off. But then when we came back, they were like, okay, let's do it again. Like, it's great. Let's go. And then from then it ran for 3.5 to 4 years straight. I did it every single day. Even after Under Armour kind of wasn't involved anymore, I still did it for a while. And it became this community, and it became this, like, again, because of the day and age that it was early on in Instagram, like everybody, would support each other and knew each other. And when they get featured, they congratulate each other, and they started to meet outside of Instagram, and I started to meet them outside of Instagram. And it was just like the coolest experience, honestly, that I've ever been a part of. And I even though I was the one that started it, like I wasn't the one who made that happen. Like the community is they made that happen. And it was such a cool thing, but it just, I've tried a few times to bring it back, and it just doesn't function the same way. This was all pre-algorithm. It was all pre-influx of fitness yoga content. And, now people barely see my content. And, it's even getting people to like watch a video is really hard, even though we can now have, back then there was no video. Like I had to learn how to edit photos using different apps so that you could see the motion, right? So it's like the overlay photos. So it was like you could see the bottom of a squat, you could see the top of a squat, like all in one photo. And, like you had to be super, like, I don't know, it was such a different time. You had to be so like scrappy to get things done. And I'm so glad, because it taught me so many things, and obviously like I did do your courses, and I did talk to you, and I read your book, and like, I did a lot of research, because like you said, I like to learn. So I taught myself how to, do a lot of these things. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't apply now because of the way that the platform runs, but it was a cool time.
Oh, it was so fascinating to watch too, because you became more and more creative with it as time went on. And I would wonder, even though I wasn't like fully on like I wasn't necessarily doing the Sweat a Day, although I probably should have been. I think this was during the era where I was on maybe 210 flights in 1 year. So that'll be my excuse that really is not a good excuse. But I would watch and I would look forward just to see what the heck you're going to do the next day, where you're going to be, what city. And I knew that behind the scenes you're doing this yourself, which most people, I mean, as they got to know you, they probably realized that. But the fact that you were so self-sufficient in getting this stuff done, and you're in front of the Bay Bridge, and then you're in whatever city, and you're in different clothes. And it was just it was really you were kind of inventing a path for yourself that didn't exist yet. And to have that partnership with Under Armour so early out of the gate for you was big too, because the influencer world has shifted too. And I don't want to get on the like algorithm hate train by any means, but
oh yeah,
I think a lot of people, most people share the same frustration with, not being able to connect with the people who are following them and also not seeing the content of the people that we follow. And so it's a shared frustration. I think what you and I have talked about recently, especially knowing the path that we've both come and been on, it's important to remember the impact that you are, listeners out there, as well as you, Shauna, are making even one-to-one. And like you shared a story the other day about people who reach out through a direct message and share, you've really helped me through X, Y, and Z. And that's what really matters still. So just trying to really transcend the whole numbers game and frustration with, is it still working, and are there still positive aspects of it, because it still is so powerful, and trying to focus on that.
Yeah, and I think, since that conversation we had, and also just like thinking as you're talking right now, I couldn't have expected it to stay the same, and I couldn't have expected, to be running sweat a day every single day for 15 years straight. Like it's just not reasonable. But I do think that, like you're saying, some of these experiences with either direct messages or meeting people that have been following for a while, and or that, like whatever it might be, I think that those moments become even more important than they were back then, because back then it was like such an early stage, we didn't really know what it was going to become. Like people weren't getting paid like they are now to do stuff like that, but I think it just means even more now. I think the physical contact with people, the tangible moments are even more like, I don't know, they're just more special, I think, now because of the nature of the way everything is. And I don't know that would have been the same back then,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you never really know who's being impacted until you have those moments. And it reminds you, just because the numbers might say one thing doesn't mean this isn't actually reaching people. And I think that comes up in my life quite often too, where it's just like, oh, well, it's, I have no idea who this is reaching exactly. But you do know, because of conversations that come full circle, it's like, oh yeah, actually that is. So anyway, for people who are listening, regardless if you have 5 followers, 100, or 50,000, just know that actually, if you care about something strong enough and you're passionate and you find purpose in it, continue to share it, because you are reaching people, and it's hard to quantify sometimes, but it actually is happening.
Yeah, and I also think that something else that's changed because of the way that Instagram itself has changed is that I think the personal stories and the personal sharing becomes so much more, I don't want to say important, but it really touches people, I think, in a different way, because what they're seeing all the time, at least in the fitness and yoga world, like they see all the fitness and yoga, right? But, like I've had a lot of really crazy things happen in my life in terms of, stuff with my dad and stuff with all of these siblings that I discovered, and, things like that have nothing to do with fitness and yoga from an outsider's perspective, have everything to do with it internally for me. And for that reason, like, I share my life very openly. And I think that those are the moments that people really kind of resonate with you. And again, that's not something that I think I would have done necessarily back in the early days, because I didn't really know that was a thing. Should I be sharing this with all these people? Like, I don't know.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. Can we actually dive into that a little bit? I know you've shared publicly, and I know some of this journey that you're on and some of these stories, but I think it'd be really valuable to share here too. And I don't even know how to prep yours. Rather than prompting with a question, I'll let you kind of start where you want to with your experience over the last couple of years, these big, huge moments.
This all happened within a world of me sort of sharing my life publicly, and I've never been a super private person, but I've definitely chosen to share things that I don't think a lot of people would share publicly like that. But I want to say it was actually during all of this happened while I was on Instagram. So I don't remember exactly what year it was, but my dad and I had never really had like a super strong relationship. That's putting it very nicely. And it kind of came to a head very early on in the sort of Instagram world. And I was in New York doing an influencer event for New Year's. And it was like I want to say it was January 2nd or January 3rd. I woke up in New York to an email where my dad was basically disowning me, telling me, a really long email saying all of these things that weren't necessarily true about me, about my mom, who he'd been divorced from since I was 2.5. So I don't know why he threw her in there, but, just saying a lot of things that were hurtful, and just very jarring, that's not someone who's supposed to just walk out of your life, and not via email, especially. Mm-hmm. And, it was a moment where I had been dealing with this for a really long time, had had many issues because of it. And, I never really stood up for myself and didn't have the confidence to do that. But this was a moment where it was kind of, again, why not now? Like this is probably like the most personal why not now moment I've ever had in my life, because he wrote all of these things. He signed the email, "Have a good life, Bill," right? Like not even dad, no, I love you, no anything, just "have a good life, Bill." And which is
gives me chills.
Oh yeah. It's all kinds of wrong. And it was a moment where I was like, if I don't write him back within, I'm going to say like 24 hours, I feel like he'll never open the email. But I felt like if I had written him back within that 24-hour period, I don't know why I came up with 24 hours, but I did. I'm pretty sure he'll at least open it. He may never respond to me, but at least I'm pretty sure he'll open it, But if I waited like 2 weeks, very easily he could have just been like, whatever, I'm not going to read that. And so I sat down literally before having to go teach this class at a hotel in New York where I was doing an event. And I wrote this email, and I basically to myself was like, okay, if this is the one moment that I get to say everything to my dad that I ever wanted to say, what would I say? How would I say it? And my number one thing I wanted to get across was, or I should say two number one things. One was, this is not okay. And the other is, this is what you've meant to me. Like I needed to say, I love you. I needed to say, thank you. I needed to say all of the things that you would want to say to someone before, because I had to treat it like I may never talk to him again, because I literally was at the time, I was like, I probably won't ever get to talk to him again. Sounds like it, So, and I said that, I stood up for myself. I was like, listen, you don't get to do this. You're the dad. This is not the way that it's supposed to be. You don't get to just walk away, but if you're going to, then at least give me the courtesy to say the things that I want to say to you. And so I thanked him for the things that he taught me. And, I told him kind of what I would take from him and pass on to my kids if I ever have them. And I said, I love you unconditionally, and I'm not going anywhere. So if you choose to walk away, you choose to walk away. And I signed it, "Love for now, your daughter, Shauna." I felt like that was a moment where I was just like, I couldn't have said that any better. I couldn't have reacted in a better way. I didn't lash out at him, but I was very like to the point about like, this is not okay. And I need you to know that. But, that was a really impactful moment for me for obvious reasons. And I shared about it on Instagram many, many times. I talk about it very frequently because from that moment moving forward, like I didn't know if I was ever going to talk to him again. And over the course of the next year and a half, I never really talked to him. The only time I had any contact with him, it was from his lawyer to my aunt's lawyer to me, because he was trying to basically take the inheritance my grandparents were leaving for him to leave to me, and he was trying to take that from me. So it was just a whole big mess. And as it turned out, that email was the very last thing I ever said to him. And he passed away, and I actually found out that he passed away from his lawyer to my aunt's lawyer to me. I never got to go to the funeral, never heard anything from what would be his fifth wife, that he was with when he passed. I don't totally know exactly how he even passed. And that was a very poignant moment for me. And I spoke about it on Instagram that day, I believe. Yeah, no, I remember. I definitely wrote about it that day. And I shared the entire story because I don't know. Part of it was I felt like Instagram had become also my community, and I felt like, I don't know if there's other people who have dealt with this. And if there are, like, it's a really hard thing to deal with. And if I can say something that might help someone, kind of work through that, then I would rather do that, than to keep it to myself. And I also just, at that point, like, I'm sharing so much about my life. I'm like, I can't not share this. This is obviously affecting me. And a lot of how I move through life and how I get through things is through movement. And everything about what I do on a career level is about movement. And it all relates and it all comes together. And, there's reasons why I have to go run super hard hills and why I need to go to yoga and why I need to, do all of these things is because I have so much going on in my world. And so does everybody else. Everybody has stories. Everybody has these things and we don't talk about them, especially in this online world where it's like, let me put the perfect avocado toast and let me put, whatever. And it's like, yeah, those are all great and they're beautiful and they're amazing and whatever, but it's not real life. Like, it's not what's happening behind the scenes. And I just felt like I needed to put that out there. And I did. And I've, since talked about it a lot, but that post by itself, I just had so many people reach out to me and tell me about, their estranged relationships with their parents, with their kids, with their brothers, with their sisters, and sort of, how they've dealt with it. And some of them still had their parents alive. And if there was anything that I could tell them, it's like, get off your chest whatever you need to get off your chest, however you can get it off. Because I honestly think I would have been more of a mess than I was had I not written that email. And, I know there are some people who did reach out because of what I put up. And, they came back and told me about it. And whether it was one person or 5 people or 100 people, it doesn't matter. Like, one person that can do something that makes them feel better about that relationship, whatever it was, then it made it worth it to put it up, Since written about it a lot, because I got a tattoo that says "Love for Now," which was that sort of sign off that I put in my email, as a reminder to myself that, words matter, and like things that you want to leave things in a way that makes you feel good about whatever it was, even if it's not a good situation. And then I got a second tattoo just this year, for his birthday. That's 2 separate words. It says "for" and "giving," because I'm now at a point where I'm working on forgiving him for a lot of things, which means I also have to work on forgiving myself for a lot of things, but it's a process and I definitely haven't yet. But I did it as 2 separate words because there's something within that also for me is about who I am and why I'm here, right? That I'm here for giving, but I'm also here for giving.
Oh, I love that. Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so yeah, I mean, and so I share that quite frequently, and there's certain people who consistently message me about it when I talk about it. Is it a good, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things that I just felt like I couldn't not say something. And I know there are a lot of other influencers and stuff that do talk about things that are pretty serious to them. I have some friends, dealt with all kinds of things. And, I also, my best friend lost her daughter when her daughter was 8 years old. And that happened right around the time of social media as well. And so I don't know. I think that there's all these things that happen in our lives, and social media is supposed to bring us closer together. We all know that sometimes that's true and sometimes that's not. But I think the powerful thing that it has is this ability for you to connect with people about things that happen in your life. And not all of the things are good, but it's how do you use that, and how do you move forward, and how do you do all of those things, So it's really interesting how it all kind of plays together.
Oh, but it's such a moving story in just one-to-one, you personally. And then when you think about sharing that and how, of course, it's impacting other people and you're hearing this, they're responding and reaching out, but how you dealt with that situation is so admirable in terms of being able to say what you need to say and stand up for yourself, and B, also bring love back into the situation and end with that, because you knew there might not be another. You just had that. You were the adult in the situation, unfortunately, with your father.
Yep.
And it just, I'm sitting here with chills and tears nearly in my eyes, but thank you for sharing it, because I know that it's impacting a lot of people. I know it is me. And then let's not forget about the second aspect of these siblings popping up.
This is the moment in my book about my family where it's and here's where everything sort of shifts, because and I knew this at the time, but that dad is not actually my biological father. And I didn't find that out until I was 27, which was before all of this part happened. So I found out that he wasn't my biological dad at 27. And it was when I was 37, I believe, that he disowned me. So it was 10 years later. And I am from a donor, which I also found out at that same moment that I found out he wasn't my biological dad. But I didn't really know much else other than that. There was pretty minimal information that my parents gave me. And, it's also it's a weird situation. And because I found out so late in my life, at least in my opinion, it was just weird. It took me a long time to even wrap my head around it, because it's just not something you ever expect to hear when you've never questioned it. And I had gotten on 23andMe in 2013, just because I was I don't even know, my whole life I was oh, I'm half Mexican, I'm half white, whatever, that's just who I am. But now I'm oh, I'm half Mexican and half, I have no idea. I really don't know. And so I got on 23andMe, and this was not the earliest days of 23andMe, but, it was definitely before the whole influx of everyone doing it now. And they didn't have a ton of information. It basically was Eastern European. And I was well, that's super helpful. I don't really know what that means. And I didn't really look at anything else. And because I didn't get that much information from that first time, I just never really went back on the site. I was whatever, it's not helpful. And I didn't really care much else than, because I'm in public health, I want to know what my health history is. That was really the only reason why I even did it. Fast forward to, it feels like forever ago, but it was really only a year and a half ago, I want to say. Yeah, year and a half ago, that I was having a random conversation with my mom and my stepdad, and he brought up the website. I think it was because there was some FDA approval that they just recently got or something. I don't know. I went back on the site, changed my profile from anonymous to Shauna H., and literally just changed my life because the next day I got an email from this man that was like, hey, looks like we're related. Let me know if that's a surprise to you, and I'm happy to chat more, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I looked at it, and, again, because it's not like I'm not a smart person. It's not like I can't read. It's not like I don't know how these things work. But like, you just don't think about these things when it's just not in your realm. Like, I looked at the site and I was like, like, whatever. That like looks like, it's like, oh, it says half brother, half whatever. I was just like, whatever. I'm not looking at it. And then after he wrote me, I looked at it again and I was like, huh. I was like, potential half brother, potential half sister, potential half brother, potential half sister. I was like, what? And there was like 8 or 9 people on there. I was like, are you kidding me? And then I was kind of freaking out because I was like, what? And then I looked at the ancestry thing and it was like, you're Jewish. And I was like, what? Like, I don't know what's happening right now. So I wrote him back and I was like, I'm not super surprised, but I also I just didn't believe it. Even though it was right there in front of my face, I wrote the company and I was like, I think I need to take the test again, which is hilarious to me. But also that's how I was like all through school. Like, I didn't get a good enough grade. Can I take the test again? And, by the time I actually had a conversation with this guy, who's my brother, like my whole world kind of changed. So, he kind of explained to me that we've all been told the same story in terms of who our donors were. He's like, a handful of us are here in the Bay Area. We've met. And I was like, what? And he was like, we have a Facebook group that's private because we have some people who can't, because of other family members don't want it out publicly that they know about this and whatever. And I was like, this is crazy. So I start to talk to him. I get in the Facebook group. I start to meet the other people. And it was just this whole different. I was like, now I have 8 siblings. I was the only child. All of a sudden, I have 8 half siblings. And then it just continues to snowball from there. And all I'm going to tell you is I believe we're up to, there's 22 of us as of now.
Holy buckets.
Yeah. And, again, it's just these are such crazy experiences. And I did talk about it on social too, and it's kind of hard to just drop that out of nowhere. So you have to kind of give the backstory a little bit. I ended up writing an article for Mind Body Green about it as well, because how do you go from being an only child to finding out that you're when I wrote the article, I was one of 17, I think. And now it's way more. But yeah, going from that to living in this world of I'm related to all of these people, and what does that mean? And how do you have relationships with them? And not everyone is going to get along. And, I don't think that there's only going to be 20 of us. There's definitely I honestly don't think that there's any less than 100 of us. And then we went through this whole thing where we're pretty sure we found the donor. And, there was a whole thing about that relationship. And
okay, I have 2 plot specific questions. If you're open to, the first is, what prompted your mom and stepfather telling you at age 27 about this news?
So at 27, I was in grad school, and I was having some health issues, and I was asking a lot of questions because it turns out they were mostly related to stress and anxiety, shockingly. But I was trying anything, and I didn't even know my blood type. So I asked my mom, I was like, hey, do you know what my blood type is? I don't even know. And my mom was like, no, you could just get it tested, whatever. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you just tell me what your blood type is, and I'll ask my dad what blood type he is, and I'll figure it out, right? Because I'm like, I can do that. I could figure that out.
I'm a doctor. Well, you weren't maybe yet, but
yeah, I was in my first master's at the time. She was just she told me what hers was, and my dad was taking a long time to respond to me or whatever. And so she's like, why don't you just go get yourself tested? And it was a pretty expensive test. I remember, for just being blood type. I was like, why is that so expensive? So I did this at-home kit, and it came out weird, but it didn't come out weird on my dad's side. It came out weird because of my mom. And so I was like that. So I did it again. And then I found out, honestly don't even remember what my blood type is, which is terrible after all this whole story. But after the second time, I got a result that made sense, at least on my mom's side. And my dad still hadn't really responded to me. And I just kind of let it go. Like I didn't even, that was it. And then fast forward to the end of that school year, my mom and my stepdad were coming down to help me pack up my apartment I was subleasing it for the summer. And my mom was like, hey, let's go have coffee. And I was like, okay. And she sits me down at coffee and she was just like, so I need to tell you something. And I was like, okay. Like never in my life did I think that she was going to be like, so your dad's not your dad, but that's what she said.
Wow.
And I know. Well, and when I tell this part of the story, people are like, oh, well, you should have known. But like when you're a kid, you don't think about it. So my dad was a paraplegic. And he was hit by a car. He was a bicycle racer, which honestly I think led to a lot of the sort of issues that he had that then came out in our relationship and whatever. But so he was a paraplegic and couldn't have kids. I didn't ever think about it because, one, that's your parents, and I don't want to think about it, especially because they hadn't been together since I was 2.5. So I was just not going to question anything. But yeah, she's like, we got a donor, and the only thing that they knew about the donor at the time, which we know was actually not true now, but was that it was a Stanford med student. And it was done at the Stanford clinic, which is all so ironic because I had wanted to go to Stanford from the time that I was 5. And
you did.
And I did, yeah. And so that was my first question to her. I was like, what did you think when I was running around at 5 years old being like, I want to go to Stanford? She was like, it was super weird, but I was like, whatever you want to do. So yeah, that's kind of what prompted it.
It's helpful just because I'm sure inquiring minds would want to know. I was like, And then my other quick question. Have you met these siblings, any of them, or are you having like a little meetup or reunion?
I had one meetup. So I met a few of them pretty quickly after like I initially found out about all of them, or found out about those 8 or 9 or whatever. There was a couple of meetings that we had. I met one of them one-on-one, and she's actually the one I think I look most alike. And it was honestly the weirdest experience ever, because again, growing up without siblings, I never looked like anyone other than my mom and my mom's side of the family. But I looked so much like my mom that like, I just, again, never questioned anything. But to look at someone your age, more or less, that I was like, and I'm on camera a lot, so I know what I look like when I talk, and I know how my mouth moves. And I was watching her mouth move, and I was like, your mouth moves like my mouth moves. That's so weird.
It's like that scene in Parent Trap when they see each other, kind of, the twins. Oh my gosh.
It's strange. And then I met a group of them, and then I had a little get together here that was, I think, 8 of us. And since then we've had like little pockets of, get-togethers and stuff. And there's a handful of them that I talk to on a pretty regular basis. And it's kind of, it's really cool. And it's also, it is weird. It's just weird, but it's also really cool because you're like, we have all these things in common, but we have lives that we just never coincided until now.
It's just amazing. That story, the whole thing, and just there's so many lessons you could pull out of it, but also just the magnitude of how things can shift so much, or your lens can just be completely turned. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. So I have so many things that I wanted to cover and talk to you about, and so we might just have to bring you on again.
Be happy to come on again.
Okay, good. One of the things is you've been in a lot of different scenarios throughout this journey. Has there been a consistent mentor in your life or a guide that has kind of been with you from academia world into hip hop, yoga, fitness, influencer world?
I think, I would say I've had so many, and a lot of them have kind of followed me through on a lot of things. But, obviously my PhD advisor, because of the brutal nature of that PhD, I literally would not have gotten through it without her. There's just no way. And she, she's actually been super supportive of everything that I've done beyond that. And again, she was one of those people that I was a little like, don't be mad at me for not going to academia. And she was like, are you serious?
That's awesome that she was open and encouraging, because those people are really influential in our lives.
Yeah, she's been amazing and, kind of helped. And she's kind of helping me now get back into academia through an adjunct position there. So she's been really great throughout that. But I don't know. I think I've had just like so many people at different, because I've kind of spanned so many different areas that I've had to have mentors in like all of the areas. I would definitely say you have actually been a huge mentor in terms of all of the crazy career changes that I've had since I came out of academia, before I even knew you, I was you were my mentor from afar.
Well, and it's funny how
I'd be friends with you.
It's a mutual experience, I think. And that's where this concept is. I think sometimes it's easier now too to have invisible, visible mentors, where we now know each other in person, but there are other people that they're an arm's length away, but because of even social media, you're being influenced by them. And then if you build a real world relationship, that's huge. I mean, it's amazing how the dynamic shifts and changes. And I'm just honored that you feel that way.
Oh my God, I'm super grateful, honestly. I mean, I don't honestly think that I would have known all of the things that I've known to do, and like even just navigating this world. And I was reading your articles before I even really knew who you were, just because I came across them in all of the research that I was doing on what all the social media stuff was, and then, following you on Twitter and all of that. But the trajectory of your career and sort of where you've gone with it and the things that you've done and like all of those types of things, like, I'm grateful.
Back at you. I mean, I don't know any other like humble badasses that are at the top of my list like you. You're just that's kind of a humble badass, I guess is the way. And I know that term gets overused, but you're legit. You have a lot of substance, and it's so nice to be inspired and see that too, even from a health and wellness and body image standpoint, you just approach it from kind of a different angle that's been really inspiring to me. So what's one lesson you've had to learn more than once?
I think one thing that it's kind of coming back to this social media thing is I seem to have to remind myself constantly about the whole, followers and likes and this and that, even though like from a very conscious level, I know that none of that really matters. But it's really hard when you're living in that world all the time that, you're like, oh, maybe I should have posted it at this time so it'll get more likes right off the bat and more comments, and then it'll be bumped up in the algorithm. And like, there's all these little things that I question all the time about, am I posting something that people like, and what do they want to see? And then I have to stop myself and be like, how about you just post what you want to post when you want to post it, and say what you want to say, and like let the people who want to hear you follow. It's so simple, but I get caught in it all the time.
We either choose to kind of play the game or be in it in that realm or not. And it's a lot healthier to not try to control something that's absolutely uncontrollable. So good. I love that answer. A few rapid fire questions.
Yes.
All-time favorite book?
It's a toss-up. I really like The Four Agreements. It's a simple book, but I think it's just so profound, and it's something that I have to remind myself of constantly, especially the not taking things personally and expectations and like all of that. Like I just think it's such a powerful book. But also I more recently, like last year I think it was, came across Ego is the Enemy.
Yes. The author has been on the show.
No, I heard it.
Good.
It might have been why I read it. I can't remember if it was which direction it went, but I really like his take on things, and I really respect the way that he speaks about it. And that book was it was really, really great for many reasons. My dad that I spoke about, it was a pretty classic narcissist. And so just understanding all of that also has been very helpful. So I really like that book too.
Those are both really good, solid. What keeps you up at night, Shauna?
Man, feeling like I can do more or do better. I feel like I'm always like, what kind of impact can I make, and how am I doing it well? Like at the moment, can I do something better? Can I do something more? How can I make a bigger impact?
Which, by the way, we didn't touch on this, and we'll have to do it next time. And I'll just say right now, the scholarship program that you launched recently, I mean, in the last, year or so, has been incredible. So if you're not familiar and you're listening, definitely you're going to want to follow Shauna if you're not already. And we'll include links, but that's kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
And Pirates or Ninjas, who's tougher and why?
Oh my gosh, I love hearing these answers on your podcast, by the way. And I have an answer, and I don't know my why. Ninjas is my answer. And I recently I can't remember who it was that said something about the pirates being drunk all the time. I don't know. I just feel like ninjas are like, they're just such, I don't know. They're so sneaky and so badass. And so, I don't know. I think I just lean towards that direction.
Fair enough. They might have it together a little more, I do admit. Can you tell me about a time when you found yourself in an oh shit moment and how you got out of it?
Oh my God. Isn't that every day? Let's see. An oh shit moment. Gosh, I really feel like I have these every day. I don't know if this is really an oh shit moment, but it was a moment where I had to get myself out of something. And I don't even think you know this, but I was in the Peace Corps for 2 weeks. And I said 2 weeks, not 2 years, like most people go for 2 years.
That's an oh shit moment if you're wanting to get out. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you kind of planned that you're going for 2 years, and I went for 2 weeks and came back. And that's actually one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, because it was the first time I felt like I was quitting something, and we've talked about my academic career. Clearly, like, you have to be very, like, I'm pretty dedicated to things once I get dedicated to them. So I don't like to quit. I don't like to get B's. I don't like to, and I was just in a situation that I was not happy with. It wasn't the program that I had initially wanted to be in. It wasn't the country I initially wanted to be in. I was like in the middle of a relationship and was initially told I was going to have to wait an extra 6 months to go. And then literally the next week was told, nope, you can go next week. So it was just, I went from I'm leaving for 2 years to, oh no, I'm going to stay for another 6 months, to just kidding, I'm leaving next week. And I was probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life. And, like literally on the floor, sobbing, crying, just not eating, very sick. And I just wasn't into the program. And that was the moment that I was like, oh shit, I got to get out, because knowing how dedicated I can be to things and how much effort I put into what I'm doing, it's almost like I watched myself from outside looking down and being like, you are not participating in this at all. Like, you're half-assing this. And that was my moment of, I would rather leave here and deal with everything I have to deal with in leaving and people questioning me and all of that, than be here and be half-ass, because someone else could be here and give 100% and really do some great things for these people. And I just felt like half-ass was not going to be good enough for me. And so I chose to leave. And I literally had said goodbye to my family and friends, like, I don't know when I'm going to see you, but I'll see you at some point, and I'll be back in 2 years, packed up everything and then decided to go home. It was a hard moment for sure.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it, but you definitely, at this point, I'm sure you feel that was exactly what was supposed to happen, because it did. What advice would you give to your younger self, Shauna?
Do exactly what you're doing. I really don't think, there's so many things that you could say, oh, you could have done this better. You could have done this way. You could have, whatever. But I really just think, especially now as I see things roll out the way that they're rolling out, there's nothing I would have changed. Like, I could say, stand up for yourself a little bit more when it comes to your dad, or, like whatever, like try to mend that relationship, or be more confident in your body, or, all of those things. But they really have informed every aspect of what I'm doing now. Like I wouldn't be able to speak about fitness and yoga in the way that I do if I hadn't dealt with an eating disorder, if I hadn't been so hard on myself about my body, all of those things. I wouldn't be able to look at things the way that I look at them in terms of family and friends and relationships if I hadn't had dealt with my dad the way that I dealt with him, and it's like, there was a lot of really hard moments, and I've had issues with anxiety and mental health and all of that, but again, it allows me to speak on those things and to connect with people who have those issues in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I hadn't experienced it myself. So I really don't have any advice for my younger self.
I love that you talked it through and you kind of explained why, because it's helpful and gives so much context to your answer. So thank you for that. And where can people follow you?
So on Instagram, it's at Shauna_Harrison. And the same on Twitter, actually. Facebook is Shauna Harrison, PhD. My website is shaunaharrison.com.
There we go. You can choose your favorite spot to connect to connect with her. Thank you so much, my friend. We could go on for another hour, and we didn't even touch half the things, but we'll just have to do it again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on here with all of the other people that you've had.
Well, it's an honor to have you, and I'm just grateful for our relationship and friendship, and continue to carry on because I'm cheering for you, and we'll be watching.
Well, thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to